before I started to prelude this morning, I have written down what is the relationship between the circular condensing theory of local time, or let us say of a phenomenological, the experience time in the soul of an organism, and the so-called karmic or causal forces, or causality, causality. Pal, then, according to my theory, which probably I am alone with this concept, past and present ontologically do not exist, or phenomenologically do not exist, which is a great difference, no? Phenomenology and ontology always separate in this aspect. The phenomenologists say we don't care about how it really is without the soul that is experiencing. Okay, we are concerned about the experience of the soul. How do we experience the qualia of, let us say, human experience, and it can be made valid also for other organisms, animals. Yeah? How do the lions, birds, eagles, whales, and maybe the plants, and maybe even the elementary conglomerates, according to Whitehead, like woods and rivers and mountains, and maybe the whole planets according to Gaia theory, and so on. Then the question would be, how do they experience it, which would be such a difficult question because we do not have an access to the soul of other animals and plants and planets. But we would not be interested in the fact how it is ontologically, how the time would flow if there would be no organisms, how the space would fold and unfold if there were no organisms, to perceive it, to live it in their souls, because even if we touch, let me close my eyes and I touch the space around me, well then I'm not touching the space, I'm touching objects in the space, and I'm experiencing the sense of touch in my soul, because if a neurologist would follow the signals from my that transfer and travel through the nerves from my pressure receptors in the fingers and the palms of my hands, that travel through the nerves through my arm, then they go to the spinal cord, and then they go to the brain, and they probably definitely finish somewhere. The neurologist would know exactly in what part of the brain, the neocortex. These signals would disappear. They would disappear, right? They don't want to say that they disappeared, because it would be they would be bad hunters. They would not get a grant from the government to, to bring some usable scientific discoveries. But unfortunately, the truth is this: they disappear, and the rest is speculation. The rest, what the neurophysicists and psychologists talk about, is pure speculation. No nobody can prove it. Where the qualia, the phenomenal experiences, have their, let us say, ontological space. Yeah? Where are they? Where do they happen? Well, we say it is in the morphogenetic field of the soul, but it is a completely different ontological category from the three-dimensional space and will never be investigated by instruments, measuring instruments, or whatever detail function that are made of matter. You can measure quarks, spins, or whatever other fantasies the people may have who study subatomic physics, but it will not measure the soul. It will measure the physical states, physical conditions in the brain cells. But these are signals, as we already know. They are not meaning of the signals. The transfer from a signal to the meaning of a signal will forever remain an inaccessible mystery. So now back to that first question: how does it connect my model of circular condensing time with the idea of causality? So the first model is this time growing like a tree. You know that from my other lectures, I repeat. All what happened, all what you have experienced, we are talking about the phenomenology of time experience, is effective in the present moment. You experience always only a presence, maybe wide, maybe narrow, okay, maybe connected to a relaxed feeling of flow, maybe connected to a stress kind of cognitive knowing of narrowing time, of lack of time, maybe. These are various formal qualities of the phenomenal time flow experience, like narrowness or the relaxed condition, or fast change or slow change, or jumping condition, like in Abhidhamma and the Buddhist or the Vedantistic phenomenology, which is a detailed description of introspective description of meditative states, which is the same as Husserl has done, in a kind of cultural different context. Husserl would sit on his chair and try to perform what he called reduction, transcendental reduction, to get to the basics of what he is perceiving, experiencing, without the admixture of cognitive evaluation, like he would describe. I'm looking at the frame of a picture on the wall. What do I experience when my eyes glide from the scene in the picture over the frame to the wall? So this is similar to what monks or the Brahmins have done for thousands of years, looking directly into the depths of their soul, what is showing itself, what is happening, trying to achieve this passive observation modus, no? Because as soon as you actively reach in, then cognition is born, then a consciousness is born, and directed consciousness and objectifying perception, which makes out of phenomena solidly defined objects, no? And then also conceptual thinking arises, no? Which all are enemies of direct phenomenal observation and of enlightenment in the cultural context of meditation, yeah? Because all these 5 functions of the ego, as we describe them, I must repeat it all the time because I am probably the only one now in the discussion of this serious question, what is the relation of cognition and soul, who states that cognition, all 5 main functions of cognition, are derivation or functional changes of the soul's morphogenetic field. That's why I am so frustrated when I hear neurologists, psychiatrists, philosophers, and psychologists start to talk about the subject, and immediately in the first sentences I notice the confusion or even the lack of realization that there could be a difference between that entities which they signify, which they label with the words soul, mind, spirit, and so on, consciousness. So, for the repetition, and because it is the basis of our investigation, we state that all 5 cognitive functions of the human species, that is, consciousness, self-consciousness, directed, personal, and egoistic, objectifying perception, which makes out of the flux of phenomena solid, sharply defined objects, and the personal, egoistic, conceptualizing thinking concept, which makes from what? From the soup of possible meanings we can compare it to the perceptual world. A child, when it is born, the child psychologist would tell us it lives in an impressionistic, phenomenal flux, kind of soup of basic colors, sounds, dynamically changing shapes, and only with growing time and perception of other organs, mainly the touch, which is solid. Ne? If you bump your head against some solid object, you have a more real or a more quantified perception than if you just look at some colors and shapes. Yeah? So the bumping into objects, feeling the surface of your body to react on the pressure that these hindrances offer you, then it will start to reduce the phenomenal flux into some clearly defined borders. So this is me and this is the other object, and it's painful if I cross the threshold. Okay, so this is the perception, and then also the words come. You hear your parents and other people around you making strange noises, and the noises are simply sounds. But when they are repeated in relation to a certain other perceptual pattern of colors, shapes, motion, and pressure, and you maybe even smell, then you start to connect it all together, and slowly the world outside becomes shaped, and you can orient yourself with all your 5 organs of perceptions and the sounds, and slowly the meaning will be born that you can then imagine. Even later when you hear the word pudding, you already have all those feelings of lust when you can touch it with your tongue, and if you can see it on the table, how it shakes you. I remember in my kindergarten, they had big like plateaus of pudding, and they cut it with a special net of wires into those blocks, and put one block on a plate, and it was still shaking, and you would grab the spoon and you would experience this ecstasy of penetrating the soft shape of the pudding, and its color would be cacao or vanilla, and you would then move it to your tongue, and then the enlightenment of pudding enlightenment would happen in all senses. This was an initiation to the Mother Gaia Sofia kitchen, because it was a lustful experience of pudding, and slowly adding all other phenomena that can be touched by your tongue, and which can be smelled, and then can be touched by your hands. When you work in the garden, and we paint pictures, and you throw balls, you swim in warm waters of the lakes, and you go through the woods, and so you see slowly the child is introduced into this wonderful dynamic paradise of phenomena that have no names, maybe, or it's not necessarily for them to have names. So now, if we take the last function of the cognitive derivation of the soul field, when this concept, abstract function is born, what does it change? What does it, so to say, solidify? It solidifies also the perceptual world. Words, as we have said, are sounds originally, and the sounds can be used to name, to point to a certain perceptual or emotional experience. So this is what is the basic function. Children do it, and poets try to do it. And then abstract thinking gets hold of those myriads of individual naming functions, where millions of different souls have named their phenomenal experiences, and it distracts, because abstraction bedeutet to pull away from. It pulls away from those individual phenomenal experiences and distills, so to say, the abstract meaning of it, and you have a word like pudding, in a dictionary, and then you can find a definition of it. Abstract definition is a kind of nourishment made of milk and sugar and some special starch powder, cooked and served in a solid shape. And there is no phenomenal experience of Peter and Paul and Mary and all the children that have a slightly different emotional and tasteful experience and visual experience of their individual pudding on a certain space and time occasion. We got very far away. We must get back. It was a deviation into the theory of perception and abstraction to illustrate that we say that the 5 cognitive functions are derivations of the soul morphogenetic field, and all somehow reduce, all the cognitive functions reduce the richness of the phenomenal experience. Even the consciousness and self-consciousness as the first 2 derivations simply reduce the richness of your soul qualities as it changes. The mirror, we have introduced another concept, a word, to point at this difference. Mirror of the soul is the true reflecting mirror, which has also what we call a reflexive quality. So you experience the quality of what you experience. It is not consciousness. Some philosophers try to introduce another word to signify this, conscience, or in German you have Bewusstsein for consciousness and Bewusstheit for this wider, original, broader function of reflecting what is being experienced now in phenomenal awareness, we could say, phenomenal awareness. Beware, beware, it is not consciousness. That's why I'm so angry that these philosophers and neurological scientists simply do not realize the basic prerequisite of communication. That when they introduce very complicated concepts that are disputed, that they must immediately present a functional definition of what they mean by this word. Otherwise, there is going to be a permanent confusion. So we give it. We say consciousness. If you use the word consciousness for a directed attention, intentional stream of energy coming out of the ego and selecting one or actually constituting, creating one clearly defined object from the phenomenal experience of the senses of perception, organs of perception, or from the wide realm of individual personal experiences in case of abstract concepts. Abstract concepts are constituted by a directed beam of consciousness, directed by an arousing out of the ego. They probe the vast field of possible individual meanings that were really experienced by individuals, and maybe traces were left of it in text and in books that the other guys then are reading, and they select one clearly defined meaning, and they say, this is what I mean by liberalism, democracy, love, pressure, power, galaxy, force, hunger, thirst, and so on. Abstract. And the whole science and the whole politics and religion is rotating inside these abstract definitions, and as the various proponents have various differing definition of what is God, or what is true, what is consciousness even, what is power, and so what is love. So there's an endless dispute, and sometimes this dispute becomes violent simply because the reputation of the scientist or of the politician or of the religious leader is connected with the authority which he, spreads, that I am one that has it right, the others are wrong, that's why you should pay me. You should pay me. And, the scientists say you should pay us because we shall discover the truth about the physical composition of matter, and that will bring an enormous resources of energy, and then you will be rich. You people who finance our research. So this endless fight arises from conceptual reduced function of the consciousness. No? So this is what we mean, a directed one way, one after the other, beam of conscious power. Whereas mirror of the soul, or sometimes soul and phenomena and love, is also passive, active, passive, very important difference. Consciousness is always acting. It's an act, a conscious act. Whereas perception, a phenomenal experience, is passive. It is not selecting, it is mirroring completely. All, like a mirror, does not select what is going to mirror in. If you put a mirror into the forest or in your room, it will simply mirror everything that it is capable of mirroring due to its physical structure, how many photons it can mirror. That's the same with our soul. It is a human soul, and so it mirrors the human world, and the human world of experiences and of perceptions. So now, finally, we have made a vast detour to give functional descriptions of the words we use to signify soul, mirror of the soul, consciousness, and objectified perception and conceptualized thinking in concept, and so on. The last theoretical note that must be repeated, because I am probably one of the few or the only one who has this model, that all those 5 functions, derivations, cognitive functions of the soul are initiated by the ego point, which is an intruder in the soul field. Okay, the ego is an intruder. The ego intruder, we left aside from where does it intrude. but it intrudes in the same functional way into all human soul fields, okay, in the childhood, okay, and it changes the natural functions of the soul field, which we find in all animals, plants, in all children. It changes them into this split that the original mirroring is kept, but it is clouded, and the mirror, metaphorically speaking, gets broken into several parts, and they are the areas of the soul in which then the 5 cognitive functions operate. Personal egoistic consciousness, personal egoistic self-consciousness, personal egoistic objectifying perception, personal egoistic conceptualized thinking, and personal egoistic will to do this or that, to have this or that, to understand this or that, to refuse not to want this or that, which is actually again a wanting in a negative form. Now, theory of time. Finally, we come to the first idea, our first vision we had. Definition, functional definition of the present moment. A growing tree, metaphor for understanding it. A tree is growing all the time. The planet is circling around the sun. Once in a year, it change the seasons of the year. The seed falls down to the earth, the tree starts to grow, and grows and grows and grows. But we, the humans who perceive it, when we perceive it, we are there in the present moment. And it's maybe this would feel to a kind of splitting of the time experience into individual soul experiences. If you remove all human beings from the planet, there will be the animals and plants, and they will also have their experience of time, of their individual phenomenal time. Plants maybe would have a very much, difficult to say in human words, in human poetic words, they would have a peaceful, slowly flowing time, being on the same spot and experiencing the atmospheric changes of rain, sunshine, warm air, cold air for a long time. It's this desire of the Zen masters to become like a tree, to sit in front of a hut and the wind goes through, the sun is coming out, sun is coming down, the moon is coming out, and nothing more. There is nobody to command, only the organs of perception, human organs of perception, receive the signals from the outside world. Signals are transferred, pressure signals, like the master is sitting on the porch now, and the planks of wood are pushing against his body on the cushions. In the distance, somebody is playing a string instrument. Somebody is singing a mantra. Birds are flying. Sound of the wings. And this all is registered by the organs of perception, by the nerves, ears, skin, and wanders into the deep mystery of the brain. Let us say the master would think in the deep mystery of the soul, and then that's it, nothing more. And the soul mirror gives the reflection specified for human organisms of that, what is happening. There is no ego. Ego has been dissolved through meditation. And you see it how it is logical in our model. It is possible to dissolve the ego in ontological terms, because it is only a derivation, a functional derivation of the soul. So it can be cleaned, like the waves in the mountain brook when it is after the rain and the water slows down, so the ripples will disappear. No commentary, no selection of, there is no central light reflected that is turning around, like, directing its narrowed beam of clear light on the flux of phenomena that are experienced and freezing them to objects in the outside world. There is no will, personal egoistic will. This is the most difficult part. To give up the will that you want to be enlightened. Because when you have a will, egoistic personal will to be enlightened, to become a celebrated master, then you will become a super egoist, because you will achieve some, maybe you are being happy and you have some first glimpses of this passive oneness with all phenomena, because in this ego-less state of the soul, that is when the five functions of the cognitions are dissolved, then there is this feeling and experience of unity logically, because there is no self which would perceive the world outside, no consciousness which would immediately separate the perception into the ego part and the object part, the subject and object. This is described many times in poetry, in Zen. But if you are a kind of not the real one, you want to get enlightenment to get a better position in the hierarchy, then you will glimpse the first glimpses of that, and then immediately your ego jumps on it and, okay, I have it. I'm going to write big books about it. I'm going to found a school. I am going to teach it. I am going to talk about it in abstract concepts. And you are really a superego trip, which is the case of many teachers of enlightenment techniques. The real masters immediately grasp this. that there is such a great danger of utilizing it for foundation of schools and personal renommee and profit, that they run away from it. Those are the true inspired souls that have been given by Mother Gaia, we have to say it, because the perception is the perception of this world, of this planet. What clears in the enlightenment sequences of meditating monks is not some breakthrough into an otherworldly realm. This is a misinterpretation by those who have kept the ego and who have kept the memory of some books they have read that makes them hunger for otherworldly mysteries and secret, and basically some secret wisdom or knowledge they can then apply to become the strongest masters, authorities. No, the true believer is a lover. True searcher for wisdom is the lover of Sofia. Philosophos, philosopher, lover of wisdom. And who really loves his lover doesn't want to dominate him, does not want to control him, because then love will be dead. It will freeze into a kind of conceptualized relationship, how it should be, and it stops growing. It stops surprising us. It stops renewing itself. So the true believer and lover of wisdom immediately pulls away from some system, organization, school, and so on, that would make him a solid position. He would have to put on a social mask to represent the school and represent his wisdom. So what phenomenally appears passively to those who are true searchers in the search for enlightenment is the clearing of the perception from all and emotion, of perception and emotion, from all additives of the 5 cognitive derivations. And mainly we know that these derivations arise from the ego. This is the wonder then of being the soul mirror. The body and soul then are clear from the ego, and they are one with the flux of phenomena. And then we can jump into our first idea, that in this condition we experience the present moment because it is related to the natural phenomena. That's why I suggest always to meditate outside, in nature, on beautiful places, because when this, your ego, dissolves, you will be given the full plate, the full biospheric plate of forms and shapes and sounds and colors, if you manage to meditate with open eyes, that are the body of Mother Gaia. And soul of Mother Gaia will manifest itself in your soul, so that you will have these transpersonal emotions, the feelings, Whereas when you meditate in a room or in a monastery somewhere, what will flood into your soul would be the shapes of furniture and walls and windows, or even some religious objects, statues and pictures and mandalas, and you will be liable to misinterpret this blissful state of freedom from the ego. We will misinterpret it like a message from the temple or the master or the institution or the picture. You will mistake the picture of the god or the goddess or a demon for its real presence, because it will simply be perceived in such clarity. Whereas if you are enlightened, that is, say, when the mirror of your soul clears from all the derivations of the ego in nature, under the bodhi tree, let us say, or alongside a brook, or the shore of the sea, or a lake, or the deep woods, what will flood into your soul will be the shapes and maybe even the emotive states of other souls in your surroundings. So you will be one with the nature around you and one with her soul multiplicity, because there are animals, there are trees, there are winds, and all may have some quality of soul. That is the story that Buddha was enlightened under the Bodhi tree. Mara, the demon of illusion, appeared to him. Maybe this can be a mythological expression of the simple fact that he doubted all that he experienced. Suddenly he was free from all that what he did those long 6 years with the mystics in the trees, from all the ascetic, craziness, and he was also free from all the memory of his life in the palace of his father, and his ego. I mean, don't think that an ego can be pushed away, expelled in one simple hit. Well, it can be, but it comes back immediately if it is not dissolved passively and lovingly. Love is then for the reality, for the Mother Nature around us, and this is the love then dissolves the ego functions, because the ego functions are directed towards the otherworldly, or towards the domination of the world, of the natural world, through the jump into the abstract model of the world, personal will to power. So there is possibility to expel the ego in one hit, like the Zen masters do when they notice you are, dreaming in you have an ego trip in your meditation. So the master will come and hit you strongly, and you will be shocked in the moment, a fraction of the second. Your story will be broken, your dreaming will be broken, and before you become angry, that is, the ego takes another shape, from the dream into anger, the master will hold you, look into your eyes and say, now you are here. That's why the funny jokes of the Zen masters have deeper meaning, like when they eat, suddenly somebody would throw a bucket of cold water over somebody's head to test him, or maybe even, a childish impulse to have fun, because if you really are free from the ego, you become like a child. And the other one has the chance to experience the return of his ego. The ego is angry, but he must catch it and stay in the little fraction of a second before it gets hold of him. He may laugh and enjoy the water, because on his face, and enjoy the childlike atmosphere of game in the monastery. Okay. So see, but the long-term dissolution of the ego is possible only by loving something that is real, passive opening to the beauty and life force of the biosphere. That is real now, and our body is made of that. And then when this lust for elementary experiences is so strong and so permanent, then the ego functions simply become boring, become reduced, you see, people who have achieved this, when they return to a city, an institution, and life in the so-called, wheel of desire, and ego, and fight, and theft, and speculation, and manipulation, propaganda, information, they simply feel bored. This is like, coming to a prison. And this is the true enlightenment, because you have something which you really love. You are not empty. You are not somebody who is fanatically opposed against the system, mainly because he cannot take part in it successfully, and wants to, show, like Nietzsche describes this very well in the genealogy of morals, the moral of resentment, of envy, arouses in the priestly ethnic group by envy. They cannot take part in that what the locally successful, rich, strong, healthy, beautiful Romans, let us say, experiences every day. Fun of life or the lust of life, they cannot take part in it. So they say, this is evil. This is evil, and they shall be punished for that when our Savior God comes, and so on. So the moral of resentment is this misunderstood cognitive will to power road to a false enlightenment, which out of envy creates a narrative, a story, and this narrative can even be, in a way, in a historical way, enlightening. If suddenly all the suffering is removed by a lightning art realization that this all what I'm experiencing is just a test in this fallen world, and I will be living forever in bliss in some other world. This gives you a kick, even it may be short and slightly hysterical, but you have nothing else. And this is a great contribution of Nietzsche, that he classifies these historical, abstract jumps into fanatical models of the world and beyond the world, other worlds, as nevertheless a function of life. No? Because like this, decaying life, dying life, can survive for some time. It's like a hope. Even if it is a false hope, it is effective. It keeps the body alive, and it keeps the soul, motivated to go on in this great struggle and to re-evaluate all values, to change the world completely according to the new paradigm I have found in my oppression, in my slavery, in my decadence. They don't say decadence, they say false oppression of our God. Okay. Well, we shall never get to our main idea, because there's so many interesting derivations that are. The last derivation finishes in the idea that appeared to me now, and a vision that appeared to me, that the whole degeneration of the human civilization on this planet and self-destruction may be attributed to a period in time in which especially thick and ill group of ethnic group or nation have been forced to survive by inventing a completely otherworldly metaphysics, and re-evaluating all the values of the old civilizations that were more or less pro-life and living in the arms of Great Mother, we could say. There were no patriarchal God from some other world, as John Lash has very nicely pointed in his book, Not in His Image. But what we want to say, you can read the work and approach John Lash's theory of Gaia, Sofia completely. We must add something. We would say that we would not even need the whole narrative of the galaxy and the eons and the creation of human race and so. We could stick to phenomenology and philosophy, like take people like Nietzsche, Klages, Heidegger, and others, and you come to the same conclusion, that the re-evaluation of all values that has been performed when the patriarchal religion, abstract religion, otherworld religion has supplanted the mother, these world sensual religions or cults, was the beginning of a great downfall of the human civilization. Because to survive, the proponents of this narrative must destroy all that is opposite to them, and the best way to do it is to change all human beings, sort of as many as possible, to their kind, to make them ill and weak and frustrated and nervous and envious, so that the only escape will be a kind of hysterical jump into some other world. Okay, it's the last hope. Yes. Back, that was a narrative detour back to our conception of time, which we were close to it when we said that what the enlightened one experiences when he is enlightened in the arms of the Great Mother, in front of his hut or in the woods or in the forest, is the oneness with all nature and love that another part of our conceptual model of the soul comes into function, as the soul in our eyes is a morphogenetic field that expands far beyond the borders of the physical body, can expand. Then it is drawn by the morphogenetic field of the trees, of the souls of the trees and the rivers and the mountains and the stars. They are larger because they are larger conglomerates, not of living matter. And the similar is drawn into the similar field. The similar field goes into the similar field, is being drawn into it. And the dissimilar is being pushed away from one another. These are the rules of sympathy and repulsion that govern the growing of the morphogenic fields of the soul into one another, merging of the field, reprogramming and updating the software of living matter through something, some other living entity which also has a soul, but which is greater, mightier. Nietzsche would depart here into his, for us, a slightly misconceived idea of the will to power in his metaphor of the ocean. When he says, should I show you what life is? I show you the branding of an ocean on the rocks, and these are so many centers of power that dominate each other, and the strongest one is the ocean that moves them all. And from that he derives this idea that the will to power as a metaphysical force penetrating all matter is bent on dominating, overcoming its surroundings, forcing its power and inner structure on all the surroundings in its vicinity. Okay, we say this is not correct completely, but may happen so if it is then transferred into the human society and under the guidance of the ego, human ego, the soul field of individuals functions like that. It wants to dominate and overcome all possible surroundings, and large is the sphere of influence. For us, from the biocentric phenomenologist, the main forces that react metaphysically between those that work between those morphogenetic fields, which is the software of living matter for all organisms and all conglomerates of organisms, such as, let us say, trees, skies, winds, and planets, even then later. The two forces that work are sympathy and repulsion. The similar is drawn to similar, and the dissimilar is pushed away from one another. Which does not mean that the dissimilar in relation to one entity can be pulled into some other that is also dissimilar. No? So it is not a domination. It is to see why the head category of activity and passivity is so important. Nietzsche's will to power, even if it is biological, if it is unconscious, so to say, over-personal, metaphysical, it acts in a way by overcoming the impulse to dominate or to overcome comes from the overcoming and dominating entity. Whereas in our model, the force that is pulling two similar soul feeds together is coming from both of them in a kind of inviting, passive way, and naturally the greater invitation, the greater pulling force becomes dominant, so that the pilgrim goes to the temple, not the temple goes to the pilgrim, but the pilgrim's soul is pulled to the temple, because he experiences this enormous radiative force. And so with everything. Well, I shall never get to the main question because it is so vast. Okay, the time and causality. As you have said, that what the enlightened experiences in this passive state of being drawn into the morphogenetic fields of nature around him gives him an insight, and it has given me an insight, that when he looks somehow in this state of his soul and he experiences the trees and the rivers and the mountains and from inside, as if to say, he has the enlightening vision that everything is forever present and growing in his meditation. We are talking about phenomenology of time, the real experience time. It is growing and growing. Whatever he experienced has left a trace of attraction and repulsion, and it is kept, so to say, stored in this ever-growing present moment as an effect. It continues to affect the changes of shapes and energy transfer permanently. So it is like a growing. If you look at the tree in your garden, if you go in the park, you have seen this tree many times. But we were always in the growing present moment, and everything what happened yesterday and 2 years ago still is effective in this tree. It's growing, the tree is growing, the roots, the leaves, the stem is thickening, but it is all. This is the very difficult moment to meditatively feel that you are living permanently in a present moment. All this jumps into the past and seeking for causal relationships between what you did and why did you do this, and this bifurcation and these parallel universes. We could say these are the works of Mara. Mara, and for us it is nothing else than the 5 ego functions, this cracking of the mirror of the soul, this obliterating of the clear vision, the smoking screen on your soul, forces you to start to speculate in concept. Okay, and then this speculation is going to produce philosophies and sciences and religions. And in older times, it went to religious wars or to egoistically dominated power wars between the lords of kings and so on. In the present day, it leads to a conceptual war about school of science, a school of politics and the school of economy, and also to power struggles of powerful warlords of industry, of politics and so, cultural wars about so many egoists who say we are, the progressive ones. And finally, it will finish in a technological disaster, because when these wrong concepts are applied, these abstract concepts and the 5 derivations of the soul field, like cognitive thinking, objectified perception, personal will to power, and so, when they are put to work on a technology that can manipulate the living body of Mother Earth, it will kill it. This new technology, massive weapons of destruction, thermonuclear bombs, and subatomic physics, manipulation, and the manipulation of the biological substratum of life in genetics and so on. It will destroy the material substance and the living force of this planet. Mother Gaia, Sofia. So the Mara, the demon, the evil demon of those 5 derivations of the soul, basically derivating from the ego, only in human beings, not in animals and plants. They will be happy without us. Maybe they will not be so happy as when a poet goes through the woods and he looks at the plants with his loving eye, but they would nevertheless go on, at least as living organisms. But being attacked by the weapons of this egoistic human being, of this delusional, in abstract world living, cracked soul, it will die, it will be destroyed. So this realization of time, present, forever growing, and everything is present in it, as an effect, can be a great revelation for the soul of a human, because it shows him nothing is lost. Everything is here, not as an idea, not as a kind of booking in the book of good deeds and evil deeds. It is present as an emotional vibration and as a kind of transformation of what was in the present growing. So the causality is, telescopically pulled, telescopically pressed into the present moment. The causality is no more linear and is no more traceable into the past and into these crazy ideas of what would have been if we have changed this sequence, that some other sequence would be. Also, all the madness of parallel universes immediately disappears because there are no bifurcations. Everything is growing so as it is, and there is nothing else. There are no other spaces and dimensions, no other worlds. Only when you are not open to the wonderful present that was given to you by your mother, the planet and goddess Gaia. Only then you will become, deceived by your own ego. We don't say by some enemy demons. By your own ego, you will be deceived to invent this linear time and causality and other worlds and bifurcations and so on. So we have finally found, through many derivations and explanations, because it showed to us that we cannot just simply say at the beginning in the perception of my variation of biocentric phenomenology of Ludwig Klages, of the re-evaluation of all values in Nietzsche, which we use mainly to point out the resentment theology and the danger of jumping into cognitive models of everything out of resentment, because resentment means you cannot enjoy life as it flows. You must invent, let's say, substitutions for your lust, okay? And then you must destroy all those who are naturally lustful and full of passion. So we needed all these detours to come to the conclusion that phenomenal experience of time in those happy souls that are embraced by the biosphere and whose mirror of the soul or whose morphogenetic soul field can merge freely with other souls, and so that they are continuously enriched and growing even in their perceptions and emotions. For them, causality collapses into one, how should we call it, one growing moment, okay? Causality is no more pushing of forces, kicking of these famous Newton balls into one another and transferring the impulse of power. Causality changes into a kind of merging of similar software that is continuously expressing the sympathy or the dissimilarity or the repulsion of those Sofia. And it gives a great release to those worry and trouble that arouse from the linear time conception that what was is no more. And I should be goddamn worried about what will come. This all is gone because we passively grow, and everything what happened is still present, even in its emotional qualities, if we open to it. And we have a good feeling of what is growing. We have a good perspective, because we don't care about perspectives at all, because that which is growing is itself good now, pleasant. Well, the children know it when they play. There's no end, and all the time it changes, and every moment is the game is the best now. Or terrible when somebody takes away the bucket of sand and hits you on your head. But this comes from the birth of the ego and the stupidity of grown-ups who do not give children a peaceful, free atmosphere, which definitely is more in the woods than on the playfield, which is behind the fence in some city where children come and parents come and all in a certain stress of a big city. Yeah? Artists know the state of freedom from the past and from the future in the ever-enlarging creative ecstasy, whereas as Nietzsche puts it, there is a feeling of guidance, of maximum personal creativity, but at the same time the feeling of passive openness that through us some greater artistic force is creating it. Now these naturally are the expressions of the morphogenetic fields that we have opened to, which pulled us into their vast field of creativity. People on psychedelic drugs can experience it with the danger of, changing the flow of pulling and repulsion suddenly. Suddenly it is good if somebody is so frozen and so locked into his fear of his egoistic world projection that it must be simply broken. To open the window, even for a short time, is better than to suffer this prison. But better, naturally, it is slowly to grow into the open garden, not only open window, but to go through the door and be in the garden, be in the woods, and be on the road for many decades. So I hope this is somehow enlightening, pleasant, and nice, that it draws you to the images I have spread and the ideas I have described, and I hope the method in which it's being done, which I call method alla prima, combines the vibration of the string instrument on the brow of the bard and supports like this the dissolution of the material substratum of the ego, which are the cells of the lobus praecentralis of human brain. And it's why the old bards were, they didn't have the scientific theory of that, but they intuitively felt that it is the way to open the soul for a vision. Passively. I'm not overcoming the enemies of my theory by, clear logical arguments on the blackboard in some university. So enjoy this new paradigm of thinking. It is a mixture of conceptual and emotional, pictorial, musical thinking, as Heidegger hinted out in his walks in the Black Forest. The deep thoughts of all thinkers are somewhere in the Akashic records. He called it Die Gedächtnis. And they speak through you. The deep thoughts cannot be achieved by a willpower intention of an intentional consciousness. They will appear on the Lichtung. He called it das Sein, the being, is opening its face to him, ne? Is turning his face to him. Well, this is good because it stresses the moment of passive openness. That he called it a being is another story. We call it the flux of dynamic flux of software of the biosphere, planet Earth, or the soul of Sofia.